Again, my name is Jonathan LacKamp, Military Veterans Law Association, UMKC Law. I appreciate everybody coming out to hear Eric Bronner talk about Veterans for All Voters. A lot of these reforms that are kind of common sense things that have a lot of institutional resistance, like ranked choice voting, instant runoffs, open primaries, and final five primaries. That we see a lot of frustration, in our political system, a lot of inaction and inability to solve kind of problems. So Eric's here to talk about his organization, Veterans for All Voters, and some of the solutions that they're putting forward. So without further ado,
awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks everyone so much for being here. As Jonathan said, my name is Eric Bronner with Veterans for All Voters. Just in time for the holidays, how to make politics less toxic. That's our big picture mission. And the good news is that we really can do this. It's happening. We're going to talk about Alaska a little bit and the hope that they give for a better system that rewards better behavior. So real quick backstory on myself. I grew up in Wisconsin and went to the Naval Academy, graduated in 1997, and served for 8 years on active duty as a naval flight officer in the back of this beautiful aircraft, the E-2C Hawkeye. Anyone ever seen an E-2C Hawkeye before? Top Gun last summer. Top Gun came out, got a little cameo. I was the only 48-year-old man in this theater, I think, holding back tears when I saw my plane there. But so we did, it's a radar plane, airborne early warning, kind of like a flying command and control center. First one off the carrier, last one to land. The picture on the left, that's just a generic radar screen. My squadron was deployed in 2000, and in 2001 we were in port when 9/11 happened, and the carrier, when we were on the George Washington, was sent up to New York City that day. So the day after 9/11, 9/12, I was flying in this plane while the smoke was still coming from the World Trade Center, without a single contact on my radar, which normally had 10,000 or more. So very eerie feeling. I bring up 9/11 in part just to say there was a sense of unity in our country right after that that's somehow almost completely vanished. After the Navy, came to St. Louis and went to law school in St. Louis, practiced law for just a short time. I did a federal clerkship after law school. Graduated in 2009, one of the worst job markets, no job, 2 kids and another one on the way. It was a little bit stressful, but a buddy said, you should apply for a clerkship with Judge Murphy. He's a Marine Corps veteran. The day Judge Murphy got my letter, his clerk got promoted to be the clerk of court. He had my letter in front of him. He was a Marine. He hired me on the spot. So I can't take credit for that. So after practicing law for a little bit, got into a real estate business with my wife, but I was missing that sense of mission and purpose that I experienced in the military. I've always wanted to get involved in politics, but one big problem, I've never joined either party. And the first thing everyone says is, Eric, you have to pick a team. And something didn't sit right about that. So in the fall of 2018, I heard a podcast on Freakonomics Radio. Anyone ever listen to Freakonomics? And it was called America's Hidden Duopoly. And the research they presented was so compelling, I said, I need to do something. I believe these solutions might be what this country needs. And so I got involved with a local statewide organization called Show Me Integrity. We helped pass a new voting system in St. Louis City, nonpartisan approval voting. And then eventually that led me, thanks to a veteran saying, Eric, you seem really passionate about this. You should do something to get more veterans involved. And that idea became what is now Veterans for All Voters. And the first thing we had to ask ourselves is, do we need to start another nonpartisan nonprofit? Is there someone out there doing this work? There's thousands of reform organizations. There's 40 or 50,000 veteran service organizations, but there wasn't anyone bringing those two worlds together in a meaningful way. So we launched in Wisconsin in the fall of 2021, my home state. Why Wisconsin? Because we're going to talk about this reform that we think has the potential to reward better behavior and make our government work again for all of us. And it's called Final Five voting. There's a bill pending in Wisconsin for Final Five voting. It's a bipartisan bill, and 3 out of the 5 co-sponsors are veterans. So we launched up there to bring awareness to the fact that veterans were doing something in the state legislature that arguably wasn't in their own best interest, but it was going to help make the system better, help make Congress work better. So since then, we've been all over the country, and we'll talk about the work we're doing more, and hopefully some of you will want to get involved with our work. This won't come as any surprise, right? Or whether it's around Thanksgiving or the dinner table, conversations around politics can be really polarizing and difficult. And there's a hunger across the country for something better, something different. And here's a bunch of stats. I'll just highlight, 62% of Americans believe a third party is needed. 70% of Americans agree America has become so polarized it can no longer solve major issues facing the country. But how do we get there? If polarization is the crisis that's underneath all the other problems that are not being solved, how do we address the polarization crisis? So this is the book that for us is the foundation of the why behind our mission. That podcast on Freakonomics Radio, America's Hidden Duopoly, became this book in 2020 called The Politics Industry. And that's one of my favorite quotes from the book. American politics is an industrial strength, nation crippling perversion of competition. You all either have or will study the Sherman Antitrust Act. Monopolies are not allowed. They're not supposed to be allowed. A duopoly should not be allowed. But when you have two private political parties controlling everything, they don't want new competitors. And so we think we have a competition problem, a lack of healthy competition in over 85% of our elections in November. This is what we reform nerds like me call the primary problem. This sitting Congress right now was elected by 8% of Americans. How can that be? It's a tricky question. It's because of gerrymandered districts, right? So districts are so favored toward one party or the other that it's the low turnout primary election that decides 83% of the outcomes in Congress. Cross-partisan problem across the country. So we've gone from the smoke-filled rooms, party bosses deciding who gets to run on the ballot, parties printing their own ballots. One of my reform heroes is fighting Bob LaFollette, former governor of Wisconsin, who fought to get the people's primary. Primary elections are voted on by the public now because of people like Bob LaFollette who fought for that 100 years ago. But what we have now is party bases controlling everything. The most active people in the parties in the primaries determine our outcomes. And because of the primary problem, we can't vote ourselves to better outcomes or better solutions. Leaving most Americans feeling exhausted, right? There's a reasonable majority on most divisive topics, but that majority is not represented in Congress. There's lots of solutions that get thrown out. So two of our biggest challenges is the people who want to protect the status quo and apathy for the system. Why should I get involved? How can we ever change this? Or misdirected anger, or solutions that are maybe good, but don't really change anything for different reasons. So the solution that we're most excited about, and again, it's not a silver bullet. We need lots of different ideas, lots of different reforms to pass. But Final Five voting fundamentally fixes the primary problem, the lack of real competition in 85% of our November elections. And this is how it does it. We'll talk a little bit more about the details. Open primaries, instant runoff, Final Five voting. How does it work? Get rid of party primaries. So we don't think private political parties should get to determine who votes in public elections. 59% of veterans are independent on one of them, independent of the two major parties. And in August, if you vote in Missouri in the primary, what do they ask you when you go in to vote in August? Anyone had this experience? Yeah, which ballot do you want? Do you want the Democratic ballot or the Republican ballot? So get rid of that and have everyone on one ballot, regardless of party, and have the top 5 finishers get rid of plurality voting, right? Sometimes called first past the post. The Center for Election Science calls plurality voting the single dumbest voting system you could possibly use if you want a truly representative democracy. All right, so where are these reforms used? This is the good news. This isn't pie in the sky. There's cities and states around the country using this. In fact, 6 southern states use ranked choice ballots for their military and overseas voters. Why? To save money and to allow more active duty military to vote. So you don't have to ship off a second round of ballots if there's a runoff election, because we'll go into the details more, but it's an instant runoff that solves the problem. And then nonpartisan primaries. There's 4 states. Louisiana's purple because technically they don't have primary elections at all. They call it the jungle primary. Everyone just goes to the general election. And the top 2, if no one gets over 50%, the top 2 do go to a runoff. 3 other states have nonpartisan primaries, and then Alaska has done something different. It's a top 4 open primary. And real quick on Alaska. So the results, this is how it got passed in Alaska. Citizens said, the system's not working well. We have the ballot initiative process. They passed a ballot initiative in 2020. This new system was used for the first time in 2022. My co-founder and I went up to Alaska earlier this year and met with people who had opposed the new system, including the current majority leader for the Alaska Senate, Kathy Giessel, opposed this ballot referendum. And now after one session of seeing that there's a bipartisan governing coalition, there's a balanced budget, more work, more real work is getting done, she travels the country talking about how much better this new system is. It didn't really change the outcomes. One of the myths is that if you use ranked choice voting, instant runoff, it's going to benefit. It's a Trojan horse for one party or the other. And that's just not true. Not true in Alaska, not true in other places that use it. More independents won. You went from 4 to 6 independents. Everything else stayed about the same. Turnout increases dramatically with open primaries. Why? Because if you give voters more choices, voters are more likely to turn out. And the Alaskans and other places, they use ranked choice voting. They say it's simple. Another myth that's used against us is it's too complicated. So those are the reforms. I ran through it really quick, and we can go through it in more detail later if there's questions. But the reform movement we're trying to build is bigger than any one reform. It's really about people who think the system is broken and they're willing to work on real solutions. So this is an example. I don't know if it'll play. It's a quick commercial, and if it doesn't play, yeah, that's okay. This is a Marine Corps veteran, Mike Escobar. He's one of our state leaders in Nevada. Nevada has a ballot measure right now for final 5 voting. It's the same as Alaska, except 5 instead of 4. And he recorded the #1 most viewed ad in support of the successful ballot campaign in Nevada. We have to pass it again in Nevada. To amend their state constitution, you have to pass something twice. But that's the kind of work we're doing with veterans and with state partners. If you're not a veteran, you can still you can get involved with us. We don't turn anyone away. Or we'll get you involved with one of our state partners. Why veterans? Because for better or for worse, Americans trust veterans. Poll after poll shows veterans and small business owners are still the 2 remaining trusted institutions. So the idea we're working on is, how do you mobilize some of America's most trusted messengers to repair some of our least trusted institutions? Our vision, our goal is to get final 5 voting, final 4 or 5 passed in 5 states by 2026. We have leaders in 47 states, about almost 300 leaders. Jonathan's one of our leaders here in Missouri. There's 3 states we don't have anyone. If you know anyone in New Mexico, North Dakota, or West Virginia, please consider introducing them to me. And this would be my challenge and when we go and talk to elected officials who are generally, many of them are very resistant to the idea of changing the system that got them elected, right? I said this to Jonathan earlier. Both parties have used these reforms privately. Both parties have used ranked choice voting privately and opposed these reforms publicly. In Washington, D.C., the ballot campaign right now for ranked choice voting is being sued by the Democratic Party. In Idaho, it was the Republican Party. But so for all the objections we get, and for all the this isn't a good idea, this is terrible, then what's your solution? What's going to get us out of the race to the extremes where nothing gets done? Our Congress is about, depending on what statistics you look at, 40 to 70% less productive than it was 10 years ago. I jumped ahead there, but yeah, so the moment we're in, it's not normal, it's not self-correcting. And the great sword, I want to be clear about this pictograph. Voters of your average American, we're not nearly as divided as our Congress. That's the good news. Independent voters, fastest growing segment of the electorate. 61% of 18 to 24-year-olds don't identify as a Republican. That was from a poll that came out about a month ago. But Congress has become more polarized and more paralyzed than ever. The pictograph shows how often people are working together across party lines, how often they're cooperating. 70% drop in committee meetings between the period 2006 to 2016. So I'm almost finished. This is the closing, or next to closing slide, right? But we were warned prophetically. If you haven't ever read Washington's farewell address, it's fantastic and well worth the reading. And he warned us, parties in the course of time become a potent engine by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be able to subvert the power of the people and usurp for themselves the reins of government. John Adams, nothing he feared more than the division of our republic into two warring parties. And then Abraham Lincoln, if destruction is going to be our lot, it's going to come from within, it's not going to come from without. But the Lincoln quote that I close every presentation and every happy hour with across the country, a movement is building, the right mission at the right time is a powerful antidote to some of the toxic polarization that we see today. And what Lincoln said in 1860 at Cooper Union, he said, "Let us have faith that right makes might. And in that faith, let us, till the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it." So for those of us who've joined this movement, this is our duty as we understand it. And I hope you'll consider joining us today. So that's a really quick overview of the national picture. I was going to open it up for some Q&A.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then if there's time, I do have a Missouri-specific case study, just a few more slides on what we tried to do. We tried to bring the Alaska model to Missouri in 2022. We failed to get enough signatures. We did, however, legalize marijuana. Not that I'm opposed to that at all, but the same signature gatherers were working on both of those. We missed a huge opportunity. We would have had top 4 open primaries. All of our elections this coming year, except for the president, would have been top 4 open primaries. There would have been real competition across party lines. So that's my presentation for the first part of it. And I don't know if anyone has questions, I'd love to start a dialogue. Yeah, that's a great question. What can you all do to get involved as students? So here in Missouri, the leading reform organization is called Show Me Integrity. They're truly cross-partisan. They were started by the son of a Tea Party state senator and the president of the Missouri NAACP. It's a good government reform organization. So if you're just signing up for their mailing list, they're trying to keep our primaries open. They're trying to make sure the ballot initiative process is still available. So if you get involved with a local organization like Show Me Integrity, there's also an organization in Kansas City working on ranked choice voting. I think it's called Rank the Vote KC. But yeah.
You explain the Alaska model a little bit more carefully, the mechanics.
Yes.
I'm sure a lot of us didn't really.
I ran through it very quickly. So I apologize for that. So I'm going to go into the Missouri slides because it actually, maybe this makes it a little better. So again, Missouri, we were trying to bring the Alaska model to Missouri. So it's two changes to how we do elections. Get rid of partisan primaries. So whether you're red, blue, green, independent, all candidates are on one ballot in the first round. Voters get one vote in the first round of voting the primary, but the top 4 finishers advance to the general election. And in the general election, the voter has the choice of just voting for one or ranking all 4. If no one gets over 50% of the first place rankings, there's an instant runoff. So I'll run through it real quick. Pretend that your first choice was Chris. I don't know Chris personally, but just go with me here, that Chris was your first choice in the instant runoff. But Chris has the least amount of votes, so Chris is eliminated. And now your vote, and Chris is eliminated and no one has over 50%. So now the votes get reallocated to the remaining candidates until someone's over 50%.
Based off of how you ranked them.
Based
Right.
off of how you ranked the candidates. Now, if your first choice was Taylor, your vote never changed, right? Because Taylor was the eventual winner. It was really Chris's votes got redistributed. So what this does is it rewards people who build broad coalitions. You can't win by running to the extremes and demonizing the other side. You have to be everyone's second or third choice in order to have a chance in this kind of system.
So like if Jamie was your second choice, but Chris was your first choice, it would just get tacked on to Jamie if Chris loses?
Yes, so if Jamie was your second choice, your vote would have gone, in the second round would have gone to Jamie, and your second choice would not have won, right? But it allows voters to express more preferences. It rewards, we say it rewards common sense problem solvers, end up doing really well in this type of system. It's been used in Ireland and Australia for over 100 years. In New Zealand for about 30 years. All 3 of those countries are ranked in the top 10 strongest democracies in the world. The United States, I kind of skipped over that, is ranked 30th. So we think that these reforms will make our system work better based on that, and other cities and states that have used it.
In Alaska, it's only used for state elections, state
In,
legislature, not for federal.
in Alaska, it's state, federal, and presidential.
Oh, really? And you said earlier that it didn't change the outcome, though. But something must have changed to make this better. Can you explain?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for asking that. So in Alaska, the makeup of the House and Senate did not change dramatically, but the types of people from both parties changed, and you ended up with folks who were more willing to work across the aisle. And they literally formed a bipartisan governing coalition together. So it rewarded, right, when Congress couldn't elect a speaker, if they had ranked choice voting, or it would have rewarded or incentivized potentially working across the aisle. You wouldn't get penalized for that. I usually say this, the word primary has become a verb, to be primary, right? If you're not towing the party line in a state that has partisan primaries, you will be primaried by someone farther to the right or farther left. So this removes that primary threat.
You talked earlier about gerrymandering, and so have you found, like, I didn't know if you knew any statistics about whether this corrects gerrymandering?
It's a great question. Yeah, does this correct gerrymandering? It's almost a complete remedy for the gerrymandering problem in that, right, the problem that gerrymandering creates is lack of competition in November. So most voters don't realize by the time you get to November, the choices were already made in your district, right? So you now have, whether a district is deep red or deep blue. Now, if let's say it's a deep blue district, you're probably going to have 3 Democrats that go to November, 2 at least, maybe 1 Republican, maybe an independent, but they will have to compete for everyone's vote, not just the party-based vote. So gerrymandering is a problem, but geographic self-sorting, even if we have independent redistricting commissions, which I fully support, they're way better than politicians picking their voters. Because of geographic self-sorting, it doesn't fully solve the problem. Yeah, so any other, these are great questions, by the way. Thank you very much. I knew I threw a lot at you very quickly.
I think we talked about this last night, but do you see the most resistance in purple states or in like dyed-in-the-wool, like red and blue states?
Right. So purple states are in some ways the trickiest for a couple different reasons. People don't think there's as much of a problem in purple states. Well, there's competition. What are you complaining about? Second, both parties in Nevada, both parties have come out against this reform package pretty strongly, using some of the same talking points, but some different tactics. So in a deep red state, no surprise, it's going to be Republicans that generally oppose this. In a deep blue state, it would be the Democratic Party. The myth is that this is going to take away their power and control. The reality is it's not going to make red states blue or blue states red. It's going to just reward a different type of Democrat and a different type of Republican. And hopefully some independents too. That's a big part why I'm doing this. I'm hoping to run for office someday as an independent, but right now there's just no path really to do that and have any chance. So,
Are there other kinds of reforms you're advocating for?
so for us as an organization, we only do Final Four, Final Five voting, or the two parts of it, right? So we will advocate for ranked choice voting. New York City uses ranked choice voting, but inside of closed primaries. So 1.1 million New York City residents who are independent don't get to participate, right? So we support incremental approaches. In Virginia, they use ranked choice voting. A lot of cities do. A lot of cities in Utah use ranked choice voting. Very supportive of that. But outside of open primaries and voting innovations, and then the ballot initiative process, right? Because only half of our states have the ballot initiative. The rest of the states, you have to go through the state legislature, like Wisconsin. And that's really challenging. So in Wisconsin, what they're doing is just changing federal elections with final five voting, not doing, because they can't do a ballot initiative and they don't think the state legislature will change their own rules. Are there other reforms that you all are interested in or have heard about or are excited about? Just curious.
So, what if we appointed legislators through a lottery?
All right.
So there was no elections. It was just a random draw out of the population. Maybe you just have some sort of minimum qualification.
Yeah.
And so it would be like a jury, who are randomly selected. And then you would have a cross section of, political ideas and demographics and ethnicities and all this kind of stuff in the legislature. And you would support that through, pretty robust, civil servant, employees who are doing the research and giving the advice and, teaching them what the issues are. But you have this collection of, randomly selected legislatures to make the decisions. I think that's a great idea. It has a name, but I can't think of the name.
Citizen assemblies. Or,
Yeah,
I mean, and there are groups working on that
yeah.
to bring it to the states. Other countries have experimented with it
Some countries have experimented with it.
with really good success, I would say, at the local level. I think for me, I'm a little more skeptical about on the federal level, just because I think it gets unwieldy. But I think for state and local, I think it's something worth exploring. Citizen assemblies, and interestingly, in these other places that have used it, I mean, randomly picking citizens, they've seen better outcomes. Because the citizens are not, in theory, are not corrupted by money or special interests or other things. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, you mentioned like Australia and Ireland. In those places, do they find that people are voted into the same position for as long as they are here, or do they rotate more often?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer. I would have to get back with you on that. So yeah, I don't want to make something up, but I would hope that because there's more competition, that there is more turnover. So this isn't exactly answering the question, but what New York City saw after their first use of ranked choice voting, women and minority representation increased by 30%. They have the most diverse city council in their history. And for folks who maybe live in New York City and are not quite as progressive. They ended up with a mayor that was more moderate. Some people really like him, some people don't like him. But so you ended up with arguably more representative outcomes, and that's kind of what our hope is.
I might have missed it, but how does this, or does it fit into the electoral college at all, or does it kind of try and?
Yeah, the Electoral College. That needs its own set of reforming. So what's going to be interesting though is Alaska and Maine. So Maine uses ranked choice voting statewide, and you get the Electoral College in Maine and Alaska. It's by district, the electors, right? So there's I think 4 districts in Maine and only 1 in Alaska. But yeah, so there's a chance that like in Maine, 3 districts could go for blue and 1 go for red. So it's a little bit more proportional. But yeah, that needs reforming as well. So the last contested election that went to the that went to Congress was, I believe this is right, was Abraham Lincoln in 1860, right? Because no one got a majority of the electors, and ends up between, Congress decides between the top 3 finishers, and on the 3rd ballot, I believe Lincoln ended up winning.
Is there a particular reason why you're focused on running as third party? Is it just on principle, or?
Why me personally?
Yeah.
As an independent, so for me, I would describe myself as an independent centrist. And I joke that I'm like a political therapist. I can find common ground with just about anyone. And what are the real solutions that are going to solve some of these huge problems that haven't been solved? Migration, immigration reform, healthcare reform, education reform. You list it, right? Problems have not been adequately addressed. I view myself as, what are the best ideas from all over the political spectrum, and then what's possible? What can we actually achieve to move forward? That's kind of my philosophy. Yeah. So
You just sound progressive. It just makes sense that you would run as forward instead of like.
It's funny.
Play the centrist thing, which is
It's really funny. I mean, it just depends on the issue. I have some friends that were very concerned that that I was Republican, and so I get it kind of both ways. So it's all right.
Just because of the way the Missouri legislature works, I know a ballot petition is probably the easiest way or most feasible way. Can you talk about how the citizen veto works in Maine, where they had basically both political parties
Came out against it,
colluding to squash something, and then it being overturned
by the citizens, which we don't have in Missouri. Maine has, if you pass a ballot amendment in Maine and the state legislature tries to undo it, the citizens can overrule that. It's a citizen veto, and that's how they got ranked choice voting in Maine. Missouri does have the ballot initiative. This is a photo of me and 2 of my kids turning in what I was told was 300,000 ballot signatures for Better Elections Missouri. Come to find out, the third-party signature vendor hadn't done basic quality control, and we fell short. So that was heartbreaking. But so this would be my specific call to action for Missouri. If you think these reforms are worth exploring or having, right now, our state legislature is going to make it nearly impossible for citizens groups to use the ballot initiative. Interestingly, when Jay Ashcroft was governor back in the 90s, the Democrats tried to do the same thing, and John Ashcroft vetoed their attempt to make it harder to use the citizens initiative. We're going to ask the Republicans to do the same thing. Do not undo this form of direct democracy. Protect our semi-open primaries. Semi-open means when I show up as an independent, do you want the Republican or Democratic ballot? That's better than closed primaries, which is also something the state legislature is trying to do, is close the primary where you would have to register as a Republican or a Democrat in order to participate in your own taxpayer-funded public election. And then the last thing is, just consider joining Show Me Integrity, one of our state-based partners. And hopefully we'll be trying again in 2026 to bring the Alaska model to Missouri. We'll see. Does that answer the question, Jonathan?
I think so.
Good slide.
There's a lot of info on there. So I think that's all I have. But I really appreciate everyone coming out. I appreciate your willingness to take a little time and learn about some new concepts. I apologize if I ran through things way too quickly. But yeah, thanks again for being here. Really small token of my gratitude to Jonathan for being a state leader with us and helping to organize this event. This is a coin. We were Veterans for Political Innovation. That having the P word in our name was not ideal. So we're now Veterans for All Voters, but Jonathan's going to get one of the original coins, which arguably will be more valuable someday, a collector's item. So,
Appreciate your interest, and I think lots of good questions. And
yeah, great question.
you know, Eric, happy to answer questions. I think there's different opinions about how this is used, and I think he has lots of great stories from Idaho, which is a Republican-dominated state, to the District of Columbia city government, which is a Democratic stronghold, about how there's a tremendous amount of institutional resistance to anything that upsets the power structure that's in place. So yeah, thanks again for your attendance, and thanks for your questions.
Yeah, thank you.